The hidden advantage. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Titan Station, her weathered face reflected in the reinforced glass as she watched the last remnants of humanity's conventional fleet limp into dock. The Battle of Proxima Centauri had cost them dearly. 12 capital ships lost, thousands of crew members dead, but it had bought them the time they needed. Behind her, Dr. Marcus Wells cleared his throat. "They're ready, Admiral." Chen turned, her dark eyes fixing on the scientist. 6 months ago, she had given him an impossible task: create something that could stand against the Nexari Empire's superior technology. The Nexari, with their crystalline ships and quantum weaponry, had pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. Conventional warfare had failed. Guerrilla tactics had failed. Now they had one last card to play. "Show me," she said simply. The laboratory deep within Titan Station hummed with activity. Through the observation window, Chen watched as the massive holding tank pulsed with bioluminescent light. Inside floated what appeared to be a ship, but unlike anything humanity had ever built before. "We call it the Prometheus class," Wells explained, his voice tight with excitement. "Part machine, part engineered biological organism. It can learn, adapt, and evolve during combat. Each vessel shares a collective intelligence with its siblings, meaning what one learns, they all learn." Chen pressed her hand against the glass. The ship creature inside seemed to respond, shifting slightly toward her. "And you're certain they can't be hacked or controlled by Nexari systems?" "That's the beauty of it," Wells smiled. "They're alive, Admiral. You might as well try to hack a shark or a tiger. Their neural networks are organic, operating on principles completely foreign to Nexari technology." The first test flights exceeded even Wells' expectations. The biomechanical ships moved with an almost predatory grace, their organic hulls shifting and adapting to different combat scenarios in real time. They could heal damage, learn from attacks, and evolve countermeasures within minutes. But time was running out. Nexari scout ships had been detected at the edge of the solar system. Their main fleet, commanded by the legendary Marshal Kextall, wouldn't be far behind. Known throughout the galaxy as the Void's executioner, Kextall had never lost a major engagement. Chen ordered the immediate production of more Prometheus vessels. The organic shipyards, themselves a marvel of bioengineering, worked tirelessly, growing new ships from the genetic template of the original. Each vessel was slightly different, representing various evolutionary branches of the same basic design. As she watched the construction through the station's windows, Chen received word that the Nexari main fleet had been detected entering the solar system. Nearly 3,000 ships, led by Kextall's flagship, the Crystal Throne. "They're earlier than we expected," Wells said, his face pale. Chen nodded, her expression grim but determined. "Good. They won't have time to detect anything unusual about our new ships before we engage." She turned to her communications officer. "Send word to all remaining conventional forces to fall back to Mars. We'll make our stand there." The plan was simple but desperate. Their conventional forces would engage the Nexari fleet head-on, appearing to make a last, hopeless stand. Then, when the enemy was fully committed, the Prometheus fleet would strike from hiding positions within Mars' asteroid belt. As Chen boarded her flagship, one of the new Prometheus vessels, she felt the ship's consciousness brush against her mind through the neural interface. It was eager, hungry for combat, yet also protective of its human crew. She had never experienced anything like it. "All ships, battle stations," she ordered. "Today we either save humanity or die trying." The Nexari fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their crystalline ships catching the light of the sun and refracting it in dazzling patterns. At their center, Kextall's flagship dwarfed everything around it, its hull gleaming like a small star. Chen watched the enemy advance, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of her species. The biomechanical ship around her seemed to share her anticipation, its organic systems humming with barely contained energy. "Let them come," she whispered, both to herself and to her ship. Let them come and learn that humanity isn't finished yet. The battle for Sol was about to begin, and with it, the greatest test humanity had ever faced. But for the first time since the war began, Shen felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Evolution's edge. Marshal Kextol stood on the command deck of the Crystal Throne, his iridescent scales gleaming under the ship's ambient lighting. Before him, the holographic display showed the human fleet, pathetically small, barely 50 ships, arrayed in a defensive formation around Mars. His outer membrane flickered with amusement. "They mean to make their final stand here," he announced to his bridge crew. "How fitting that humanity's cradle of space exploration will become their grave." But something bothered him about the human formation. Throughout the war, Admiral Chen had proven to be a cunning opponent. This seemed too straightforward, too desperate. His secondary eyes scanned the tactical display, searching for hidden threats. "Full-spectrum scan of the asteroid belt," he ordered, "and deploy the quantum resonance sensors." Before his crew could comply, the human fleet opened fire. Their weapons were exactly as ineffective as Kextol expected, barely scratching the advanced shielding of his ships. He waited patiently, allowing them to exhaust their initial barrage. "Return fire," he commanded. "Standard elimination pattern." The Nexeri fleet's crystalline weapons activated, preparing to deliver their devastating payload. But at that exact moment, Kextol's tactical officer shouted in alarm. Multiple contacts. Emerging from the asteroid belt, the new ships appeared unlike anything the Nexeri had encountered. Their hulls seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, organic curves blending seamlessly with technological components. They moved with impossible speed and grace, crossing the distance to the Nexeri fleet before Kextol could issue new orders. The first shots from these strange vessels passed straight through Nexeri shields, as if they didn't exist. 3 cruisers exploded instantly. Kextol's membrane paled. Their shields operated on fundamental constants of physics. Nothing could simply ignore them. "Impossible," he whispered. Then louder, "All ships, concentrate fire on the new contacts." But the human vessels were already adapting. Where Nexeri weapons struck true, the strange ships' hulls would ripple and change composition, becoming resistant to whatever had just damaged them. With each passing minute, they became harder to hit, harder to hurt. "Marshal." His science officer's voice cracked with panic. "These ships, they're evolving. Their molecular structure is reorganizing in real time." Kextol watched in horror as a wing of his best ships was torn apart by weapons that seemed to adapt specifically to exploit weaknesses in Nexeri design. The human vessels moved like predators, hunting in packs, learning and sharing information with each other. Within the first 15 minutes of engagement, he had lost over 200 ships. The humans' conventional fleet hadn't even engaged yet. They simply held position, forcing his forces to divide their attention. "Pull back," he ordered. "All ships, emergency retreat to." A massive impact rocked the Crystal Throne. On his tactical display, Kextol watched one of the human ships literally phase through his vessel's crystal lattice structure, its weapons tearing through critical systems as it passed. Alarms blared throughout the ship as primary and secondary systems failed. "How?" he demanded. "How are they doing this?" His science officer's response chilled him to his core. "They're not just ships, Marshal. They're alive, and they're hunting us." The battle deteriorated into chaos. The Nexeri fleet's perfect formation shattered as ships tried to retreat in different directions. But the human vessels had predicted this, cutting off their escape vectors with deadly precision. Each Nexeri tactic was countered before it could be fully implemented, as if the enemy could anticipate their every move. Admiral Chen's voice came through on all frequencies. "Marshal Kextol, surrender now, and we will spare your remaining forces." Kextol's pride warred with his duty to his crew. In less than an hour, these impossible human ships had decimated nearly half his fleet. Even now, he watched them evolving new capabilities, becoming even more efficient at destroying his forces. "This is Marshal Kextol," he finally responded, his voice heavy with defeat. "I hereby surrender all remaining Nexari forces in this sector." As he watched his mighty fleet power down their weapons, Kextol realized that humanity hadn't been desperate when they made their stand at Mars. They had been waiting, preparing, and in doing so, they had changed the nature of warfare itself. The battle was over. The legend of the Void's executioner had been shattered, and the galaxy would never be the same. The counter-strike. The Nexari High Command facility on Centaurus Prime buzzed with frantic activity. 3 weeks had passed since Marshal Kextol's devastating defeat at Mars, and the Empire's best scientists worked tirelessly to understand the nature of humanity's new weapons. In the central laboratory, Kextol himself stood before the High Command Council, his usual proud bearing diminished by recent events. Behind him, a hologram displayed footage from the battle, showing the Prometheus ships in action. "As you can see," he gestured to the display, "conventional tactics are useless against these vessels. They adapt too quickly, learn too efficiently. Each engagement only makes them stronger." Supreme Commander Vexera, her crystalline form towering over the others, leaned forward. "And you're certain these ships are biological in nature?" "Partially," Kextol confirmed. "Our analysis suggests they're a hybrid, sophisticated technology merged with engineered organic components. The combination allows them to evolve in real time, developing countermeasures to our weapons even as we use them." The implications were staggering. For centuries, the Nexari had dominated space warfare through superior technology. Their crystalline ships, powered by quantum mechanics and operating on principles other races could barely understand, had made them virtually invincible. Until now. "The humans have changed the rules of engagement," Vexera stated. "They've created something that operates outside the bounds of conventional physics. Our advantage is gone." Reports were coming in from across Nexari space. Human forces, now equipped with growing numbers of Prometheus vessels, had begun a systematic campaign to reclaim their lost territories. Each battle provided more combat data for the biological ships to analyze and adapt to. The Nexari found themselves facing an enemy that literally evolved to counter their every strategy. Dr. Ixel, the Empire's leading xenobiologist, stepped forward. "We've been approaching this problem from the wrong angle," she announced. "We can't fight these ships with technology alone. We need to understand them as living organisms." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some argued for attempting to communicate with the ships themselves, treating them as a new form of life. Others insisted on developing biological weapons specifically targeted at their organic components. A few even suggested trying to capture and reverse engineer one of the vessels. But Kextol knew better. He had faced these ships in combat, had watched them think, adapt, and hunt. "They're not just weapons," he interrupted the arguing council members. "They're the next stage of warfare. The humans haven't simply created better ships, they created a new form of combat evolution." In the weeks that followed, the Nexari attempted various countermeasures. They developed quantum disruption fields designed to interfere with the ship's biological processes. They deployed swarms of microscopic crystal drones programmed to attack organic matter. They even attempted to create their own biological ships, rushing the development process in their desperation. Nothing worked. The Prometheus vessels adapted to each new threat, becoming even more formidable in the process. Worse, they seemed to be developing new capabilities entirely on their own, demonstrating levels of creativity that shocked even their human creators. Admiral Chen, now leading humanity's counteroffensive, pressed their advantage relentlessly. She understood that the Nexari needed time to develop effective countermeasures, time she wouldn't give them. Her fleet struck key military installations across Nexari space, each victory providing more evolutionary data for the ships to process. In his private quarters, Kextol reviewed the latest battle reports with growing dread. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were systematically dismantling the Nexari Empire's military infrastructure. Each engagement made their ships more effective, more lethal, more impossible to counter. A priority communication from Supreme Commander Vexra interrupted his thoughts. "Marshal, we've received intelligence that the humans are planning something big. They're gathering their forces for a major offensive." Kextel's scales shifted color with concern. "Where?" "The Nexari core worlds." Vexra's voice was grim. "They're coming for the heart of the Empire." The Marshal stared out at the crystalline spires of Centaurus Prime, knowing that the next battle would determine not just military victory or defeat, but the very survival of the Nexari Empire. Humanity, the species they had nearly driven to extinction, now held the power to end their civilization. "Alert all remaining forces," he ordered. "Call in every ship, every reserve. If we're going to survive this, we need to take a stand now, before those ships evolve even further." As orders went out across Nexari space, Kextel wondered if they were already too late. The humans had turned their greatest strength, their adaptability, into a weapon more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The final battle was coming, and with it, the fate of two civilizations would be decided. Breaking point. The space above Nexus Prime, crown jewel of the Nexari Empire, shimmered with the gathered might of over 5,000 crystalline warships. Every available vessel had been recalled for this final stand. The assembled fleet represented the largest concentration of Nexari military power in the Empire's history. Marshal Kextel stood aboard a new flagship, the Crystalline Vengeance, watching his forces take position. The ship's quantum sensors detected the approaching human fleet, fewer in number but led by hundreds of the dreaded Prometheus vessels. "All ships report ready, Marshal," his tactical officer announced. "The new countermeasures have been distributed throughout the fleet." Kextel nodded grimly. Their scientists had worked frantically to develop weapons specifically designed to target the biological components of the human ships. Whether they would work remained to be seen. The Prometheus vessels had demonstrated an uncanny ability to adapt to everything thrown at them so far. Aboard her flagship, Admiral Chen reviewed the final battle plans with Dr. Wells. The scientist looked troubled as he studied the tactical display showing the massive Nexari fleet. "They've gathered everything they have," Wells observed. "Our ships have never faced such concentrated firepower before." Chen's expression remained calm. "How are the ships responding?" "They're excited," Wells replied, monitoring the neural feedback. "The collective intelligence has evolved far beyond our original projections. They're not just learning anymore. They're innovating, creating entirely new strategies and capabilities." The Admiral smiled slightly. "Good. We'll need every advantage we can get." The battle began with a massive volley from the Nexari fleet. Thousands of quantum-based weapons fired simultaneously, creating a wall of destructive energy that no conventional force could have survived. The Prometheus ships responded in ways that shocked both sides. Instead of evading, the biological vessels began to merge, combining into larger entities that could better withstand the assault. What had been hundreds of individual ships became dozens of massive, hybrid organisms, their combined neural networks achieving even higher levels of complexity and adaptation. Kextel watched in horror as his fleet's opening barrage was absorbed and analyzed by these new composite beings. "Launch the bioweapons," he ordered. "All ships, execute Pattern Omega." Swarms of crystal-based nanites designed to attack organic matter were deployed, along with quantum disruption fields tuned to the specific frequencies of the Prometheus ship's biological components. For a moment, it seemed to work. Several of the human vessels showed signs of distress. But then something unprecedented occurred. The Prometheus ships began to sing. The sound, transmitted through space on all frequencies, was both beautiful and terrifying. It wasn't just communication. It was evolution made audible. The ships were rewriting their own genetic code in real time, turning the Nexari attack against them. "Marshal," his science officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "The nanites, they're being reprogrammed. The human ships have somehow altered their basic programming through quantum resonance." The merged Prometheus vessels began to advance, now immune to the Nexary's carefully prepared countermeasures. Worse, they had incorporated aspects of the crystal technology into their own structure, developing hybrid weapons that could bypass Nexary defenses completely. Admiral Chen watched as her ships pressed forward, their capability for adaptation exceeding even her most optimistic expectations. "Send word to the remaining conventional fleet," she ordered. "Begin the secondary attack phase." Human ships emerged from hyperspace behind the Nexary formation, cutting off their retreat. But these weren't normal vessels. They had been partially transformed by contact with the Prometheus ships, their hulls showing signs of organic growth and adaptation. "Impossible," Kextol whispered, watching his carefully planned defense crumble. The humans hadn't just created new weapons. They had started an evolutionary cascade that was spreading through all their technology. The battle devolved into chaos as Nexary ships found themselves facing an enemy that could adapt faster than they could develop new tactics. The Prometheus vessels moved with impossible grace, their merged forms demonstrating levels of coordination that defied conventional military doctrine. In the heart of the conflict, something extraordinary happened. One of the largest merged Prometheus entities approached the crystalline vengeance, its surface rippling with patterns that mimicked the crystalline structure of Nexary ships. It wasn't just mimicking, it was attempting to communicate. "Marshal," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission. But it's not just data. It's showing us something." On every screen throughout both fleets, images appeared. Visions of possible futures, of cooperation instead of conflict, of technology and biology merging to create something greater than either side had imagined. The Prometheus ships weren't just trying to win the war. They were offering a path to transcendence. Kextol stood transfixed, watching as the future of both species hung in the balance. The decision he would make in the next few moments would determine not just the outcome of the battle, but the course of galactic civilization itself. Victory's price. Time seemed to stop in the space above Nexus Prime as both fleets hung suspended between war and peace. Marshal Kextol studied the visions being transmitted by the merged Prometheus vessels, images of a future that defied everything he had believed possible. The beings that had evolved from humanity's desperate gambit were offering something beyond victory or defeat. They had become living bridges between organic and artificial life, between the crystalline technology of the Nexary and the adaptability of human biology. "Admiral Chen," Kextol transmitted on an open channel, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of conflict. "Your ships, they're not just weapons anymore, are they?" "No, Marshal," Chen replied softly. "They've become something more, something neither of us fully understood until now." She paused, then added, "They're showing us a way forward, if we're brave enough to take it." Dr. Wells' voice trembled with excitement as he monitored the neural readings from the Prometheus Collective, the merger of our technologies. It's what they've been evolving toward all along. Not just adapting to fight, but adapting to bridge the gap between our species. Throughout both fleets, crews watched in awe as the Prometheus ships demonstrated what this fusion might mean. Their hybrid forms incorporated the best of both civilizations. The crystal clarity of Nexary quantum science merged with the endless adaptability of human biological engineering. Supreme Commander Vexra's voice cut through the tension. "Marshal Kextol, the High Command has reviewed the Prometheus Collective's proposal. The choice is yours to make. Your experience with these beings makes you best qualified to decide the future of our people." Kextol closed his secondary eyes, remembering the devastating defeat at Mars, the weeks of desperate countermeasures, the seemingly hopeless final stand. But he also remembered the moment of revelation when he first understood that the Prometheus ships were more than weapons. They were evolution itself, reaching toward something greater. "Lower our weapons," he commanded. "All ships, power down combat systems." The order rippled through the Nexary fleet. One by one, the crystalline warships dimmed their weapon signatures. The merged Prometheus vessels responded by beginning to separate, returning to their individual forms, but now displaying a fascinating blend of organic and crystalline structures. Admiral Chen stood from her command chair. Dr. Wells, begin transmission of the technical data for the neural interface systems. Marshal Kextall, we're ready to receive your crystalline computing protocols whenever you're prepared to share them. The next several hours were unlike anything either civilization had experienced. Scientists from both sides worked feverishly to understand the possibilities that were opening before them. The Prometheus ships, their evolution now focused on integration rather than combat, served as living laboratories for the merger of technologies. "It's beautiful," Dr. Wells whispered, watching as a Nexari crystal matrix was successfully integrated into a Prometheus vessel's organic neural network. "They're not just combining our technologies, they're creating entirely new principles of science." But amidst the excitement, Chen noticed Kextall's troubled expression during a joint briefing. "You're concerned about something, Marshal." "Change is never easy," he responded. "Our civilizations have been enemies for so long. How do we ensure this transformation doesn't erase what makes us unique?" Chen smiled. "That's exactly what makes this perfect. The Prometheus Collective didn't eliminate differences. It embraced them. Evolution isn't about becoming the same. It's about becoming something greater while maintaining what makes us who we are." Over the following months, the integration spread throughout both civilizations. Nexari ships began incorporating organic components, while human vessels adopted crystalline technologies. The Prometheus vessels, having fulfilled their role as catalysts for change, continued to evolve alongside their creators, exploring new possibilities that neither species had imagined. A year after the battle that never was, Kextall and Chen stood together on the observation deck of Unity Station, a massive structure orbiting Nexus Prime that incorporated both human and Nexari design philosophies. Below them, a new generation of ships was taking shape, vessels that represented the perfect synthesis of both civilizations' achievements. "Did you ever imagine it would end like this?" Kextall asked, watching a group of human and Nexari children playing together in the station's artificial gravity field. "End," Chen replied with a knowing smile. "No, Marshal, this isn't an ending at all. It's an evolution, the beginning of something entirely new." Above them, a Prometheus ship passed by the observation window, its hybrid form a testament to the power of adaptation and change. In its wake, crystals and organic matter danced together in space, painting patterns of possibility across the stars. The war was over, but the real victory wasn't in conquest or surrender. It was in the discovery that the greatest strength of any species lies not in its ability to destroy, but in its capacity to adapt, to change, and to grow beyond the limitations of its past. The future beckoned, full of endless possibilities, as humanity and the Nexari took their first steps together into a new age of exploration and discovery. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter, illuminating the path forward for two civilizations that had learned the most important lesson of all. True evolution comes not from conflict, but from cooperation. The end.